Hey guys, tonight we drift softly down the Nile, past swaying papyrus reeds, and into the heart of an ancient world that smelled a little less than fresh. You're walking barefoot across sun-baked tiles, sand stuck between your toes, ducking under linen awnings that barely shield you from the heat. Somewhere nearby, someone's cooking fish over a fire. Someone else is crushing garlic with a stone mortar, and a breeze carries a ripe bouquet of everything. The truth is, if you've ever wondered what daily life in ancient Egypt smelled like, your nose might not survive this trip. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're waking up in a reed mat bed in Thebes around 1400 BCE. Your house is made of sun-dried mud brick, the ceiling low, the air thick with incense and something sharper. You stretch, yawn, and immediately get a whiff of your own breath. Oof. Maybe it's the leftover beer bread from last night. Maybe it's the sour date paste. Maybe it's just ancient Egypt. See, ancient Egyptians were obsessed with cleanliness, but their dental hygiene, not exactly minty fresh. Their diet, rich in carbs, onions, and dried fish, was brutal on the breath. Combine that with desert dehydration and the occasional snack of fermented duck egg, and, well, let's just say no one's leaning in for a romantic whisper without thinking twice. And here's the thing. You're not alone. Pretty much everyone stinks a little. The average Egyptian, whether farmer or noble, walks around with teeth ground down by sand in their bread and breath that could curdle milk. Even the kids have plaque issues. You watch a small boy chew on a stick of licorice root. He offers you a bite. You politely decline. The Nile's not just a river. It's your lifeline, your bath, your laundry station, and yes, your toothbrush rinse. You cup a handful of its water, swish, and try not to think about the hippo bathing downstream. Historians still argue whether ancient Egyptians regularly rinsed their mouths or if that was reserved for ritual cleansing. Either way, your breath's not getting any better. Out in the courtyard, your neighbor is grinding something fragrant. Cloves? No, too exotic. It's probably crushed carob or maybe dried juniper berries. She's making a poultice for her husband's toothache, but it smells vaguely pleasant. You ask her about it, and she chuckles, dabbing a bit on her wrist. For the breath, she says, if only it worked. Mainstream evidence shows that Egyptians used tooth-cleaning powders made of ash, ground limestone, and sometimes burnt eggshells. Quirky as it sounds, these early attempts at dental care were often more damaging than helpful, scraping enamel and irritating gums. Still, it beat nothing, and you can't help but think maybe a little ash breath is better than dried fish breath. You wander through the bustling market later that afternoon, and every smell assaults your senses. Spices, sweat, dung, sweet date, cakes. A perfume vendor waves you over and offers a dab of myrrh oil behind the ear. Tempting, but you point to your mouth instead. She grins, showing off teeth stained from years of honey chewing. You need priest mint, she says, laughing. Turns out the priests are a little more breath-conscious. Their roles demand purity, ritual, baths, shaved heads, daily incense offerings. And that includes not knocking out the gods with their morning breath. But we'll get to them soon. For now, as the sun dips below the palm trees and your stomach starts growling again, you munch on a simple meal of onions, lentils, and barley porridge. You know it won't help. You try to chew slowly, hoping that helps. It doesn't. Later, lying in bed, you imagine a world with mint chewing gum, toothpaste commercials, maybe even cinnamon Altoids. But for now, you're stuck with what the Nile and your neighbor's spice box can offer. And in ancient Egypt, that's not nothing. It's just a little chewy, smoky, and wildly inconsistent. Still, In this sweltering, perfumed world of lotus flowers and crocodile gods, the quest for fresh breath is quietly underway, and your nose, bless it, is leading the charge. You're up early again, woken not by sunlight but by the clanging of a bronze bell. Temple time. The priests begin their day long before the rest of the city yawns, and today you've somehow talked your way into tagging along. Don't ask how. Let's just say the gods work in mysterious, slightly minty ways. As you duck past limestone pillars and into the dim hush of the temple, the air shifts. There's a blend of myrrh smoke, beeswax, and something faintly herbal. It's cooler here, shaded from the sun, and everything feels calmer, more deliberate. You can't help but notice how clean the priests are, like unnaturally clean. Shaved heads, linen robes bleached to a near-blinding white, not a speck of dust anywhere. These aren't your average sweaty Theban market-goers. No garlic breath here. One priest smiles politely and lifts a small bowl of what looks like dried herbs to his lips. He chews slowly, then sets it down. You pretend not to stare. Later, when no one's looking, you sneak a peek into the bowl, dried. Frankincense and bits of cinnamon bark, maybe even some crushed cardamom. Fancy stuff. This isn't just for flavor, it's about ritual purity, especially before approaching a statue of a god. Historians still argue whether temple mouth cleansing was symbolic, practical, or both. Was it about actual breath freshening or about the metaphorical purity of the words you spoke? Either way, the result is the same. Priests with breath far less offensive than the average onion munchers. You shadow them further, watching as they light incense sticks and wave them gently in all directions, toward statues, toward doorways, and sometimes, a little conspicuously, toward one another. You suppress a smile. Even in the holiest places, a little low-key deodorizing never hurts. Later that afternoon, back in the outer precinct of the temple, you sit on a shaded bench and nibble at a sweet treat given by a young acolyte, honey mixed with herbs and rolled into a sticky little ball. You pop it in your mouth, surprised by the burst of flavor. It's not just sweet, but spicy, almost peppery. He giggles at your expression. "Temple mint," he whispers, miming bad breath with a wave of his hand. The treat sticks in your teeth, but your breath does seem less awful. You notice several others with similar honey herb balls tucked in pouches or cloth wraps. Some are round, some square. A few are hardened into lozenges, probably from sitting in the sun too long. It dawns on you. This might be the earliest form of a breath mint. Mainstream archaeological records show that recipes for these herb confections existed as early as 1500 BCE. Often combining frankincense, cinnamon, and honey, these pellets were prescribed in medical papyri as both breath fresheners and stomach soothers. A little multitasking goes a long way when the ingredients are hard to come by. You ask an older priest what's in his mint. He smiles a nearly toothless smile and says, "Words the gods like to hear." That's one way to describe cinnamon. Bark. Wandering out of the temple and into the garden beyond, you're hit again by that desert heat. But now, the smells of sweet herbs growing in clay pots surround you. Basil, thyme, coriander. Plants that might have made it into those early mint recipes. A boy is watering them with a clay jug, and the smell of damp earth mixes with the green, spicy scent of the herbs. You crouch beside him and ask what they're for. "Medicine," he says, "and chewing." He shrugs like it's obvious. Mouth stink. You both laugh. Then he hands you a sprig of something sharp, like mint, but not. You pop it in your mouth and instantly regret it. Bitterness. Floods your tongue, eyes water. The boy laughs again and dashes off, jug swinging. That wasn't mint. It was probably pennyroyal or rue. Still, it gets the job done, and your breath now smells like a medieval potion. You wander further, tasting little bits of plant here and there, some bitter, some sweet, some definitely inedible. One thing becomes clear. These people were experimenting. Whether for ritual, medicine, or just to make their breath a little less terrifying, they were blending ingredients into pastes, balls, powders, and maybe even early chewing gum. Scholars still debate whether these concoctions were everyday items, or reserved for the wealthy or priestly class. You suspect the answer is yes, both, because no one, not even a God-pleasing priest, wants to smell like fermented onions all day. By sunset, you're back home again, tucking away your newly acquired herbal ball in a piece of linen and slipping it under your sleeping mat. You lie back wondering what tomorrow will bring and whether you'll ever get used to the taste of crushed frankincense. You probably won't. But your breath? It's definitely better than it was this morning. You wake before the sun, mostly because the streets of ancient Thebes aren't exactly soundproof. Somewhere nearby, a donkey brays like it's coughing up an old curse, and someone starts hammering copper pots as if breakfast requires a small percussion ensemble. You groan, roll over, and remember the herbal ball tucked under your mat. You fish it out, press it between your fingers, still sticky, and hesitate. Then, like a true ancient Egyptian, you pop it into your mouth with more hope than sense. It's less spicy than yesterday, more mellow, maybe the herb settled overnight. You chew slowly, savoring the warmth of cinnamon and the cooling tingle of what might be mint, or at least some ancient cousin of it. Either way, your mouth feels cleaner, not toothpaste clean, but this won't offend the afterlife clean. Today, you're heading into the heart of the market, a vibrant chaos of colors, smells, shouting vendors, and curious animals with no sense of personal space. It's the perfect place to hunt for answers about these curious confections, and also maybe some dates, because breath mints don't count as breakfast. You squeeze into a lane where stalls are piled high with dried figs, jars of honey, crushed, lotus seeds, and little clay bowls of powdered herbs. A woman with kohl-rimmed eyes you back and smirks. "Looking for perfume or protection?" she asks. You shrug, point at your mouth, then mime chewing. She laughs, a loud, raspy chuckle, and scoops something from a dish. "You want mouth spice," she says, pushing it into a linen twist and tying it like a tiny herbal candy. Inside is a mix of dried sweet rush, fennel seeds, and a touch of something smoky. You chew. And again that familiar tingling warmth spreads. Sweet, then peppery. You raise an eyebrow. She grins. Everyone thinks perfume is for the body. It's also for breath. Historians still argue whether these herb balls were strictly medicinal or if they were as much about vanity as anything else. Maybe both. You watch her pack several more into neat rows, some for wealthy households, others for workers heading to the fields. Mouth fresheners for all classes. Apparently nobody's breath was winning awards. A vendor nearby sells resin in crumbly chunks, mostly myrrh and frankincense. He lets you sniff a few. "Some chew it straight," he says, "but most mix it with honey. Makes it go down easier." You nod, resisting the urge to tell him that go down easier is a pretty generous description of yesterday's mouth-watering disaster. You also hear a fringe rumor about mixing crocodile dung into cleansing pellets to keep evil spirits away. Whether that's real or just a joke among apothecaries is unclear, but you make a mental note to not chew anything that smells like a swamp in July. The market reveals another layer to this breath mint mystery. Flavor, sure, but also status. The richer you are, the more spices you can afford. Cinnamon from distant lands, cardamom from the far south, honey aged in clay jars sealed with palm resin. You suddenly realize that minting your breath wasn't just about not offending the gods, it was about not offending your boss, your priest, your date, or your in-laws. Later, while haggling over a strip of embroidered linen, you catch a conversation between two older men debating which temple's mints are better. One swears by the priests of Heliopolis, the cinnamon ones, sharp as a scorpion's sting. The other prefers the Alexandria blend, soothing, like lotus milk. You smile to yourself. You've just walked into the ancient equivalent of a mint flavor argument. You make your way to a small stone house tucked near the edge of the market district. Inside, an herbalist welcomes you into a world of drying bundles, clinking jars, and one particularly bold cat. She's pounding something in a stone mortar, and the air smells like eucalyptus and sweet grass. You sit cross-legged on the floor as she explains the ingredients: juniper berries for freshness, coriander seeds for digestion, and honey as the great binder of everything. She rolls a small ball between her palms, pinches the edges into a flower shape, and places it on a cloth to dry. "Let it rest," she says. "Then chew when your words start to smell tired." That line sticks with you. When your words start to smell tired. Poetic. Maybe the ancient Egyptians knew that bad breath wasn't just physical, it was emotional, spiritual, reputational. In a world of gods, politics, and gossip, your mouth had to stay ready. You thank her, toss her a few small copper rings, and walk out with a linen pouch full of miniature miracles. The heat has settled in now, and the marketplace has slowed to a drowsy hum. You walk along the shaded side of the street, popping one of the balls into your mouth just as a wind kicks up, carrying the scent of nearby date palms and distant temple smoke. Your breath, for once, isn't the worst thing in the air. Your sandals crunch softly over the dusty stones of an open-air marketplace, one bursting with baskets of dried herbs, clusters of dates, and a curious little pyramid of what looks like, could it be, breath mints. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Because before those fragrant pellets showed up in papyrus records, ancient Egyptians had to get creative with how they approached the problem of halitosis. Let's be honest, personal hygiene in 2000 BCE wasn't exactly spa day standards. Baths were a luxury. Toothbrushes? Not quite. But the Egyptians, ever practical, had an entire hygiene ritual that centered around cleanliness of both body and spirit. You might find yourself standing by the Nile, scrubbing down with natron, a naturally occurring blend of salt and baking soda. It was drying, sure, but it left your skin squeaky clean and slightly mummified feeling. Mouth hygiene, however, required a different approach. Enter the tooth-cleaning powders. These were gritty blends, often made from crushed rock salt, dried flowers, mint, and, brace yourself, ashes from burned ox hooves. Yep, you're brushing your teeth with cowfoot dust. Historians still argue whether this mixture actually improved breath or just masked it with the scent of scorched barnyard. And that brings us to a surprisingly sweet twist: honey. Not just for offering to gods or embalming royal pets, honey was also used in early oral remedies. Combined with herbs like cinnamon and frankincense, it became a paste that could soothe irritated gums and freshen up a less-than-divine exhale. Sticky? Sure. But better than dead fish breath during your afterlife judgment. Let's not forget the symbolism either. The Egyptians believed smell was deeply connected to spiritual purity. A foul odor meant imbalance, sin, or even demonic presence. No one wanted to meet Osiris while reeking of garlic and goat stew. So, perfumed wax cones were worn on heads at parties, slowly melting and releasing fragrance, kind of like ancient air fresheners. Except, on your scalp. You duck into a shade-covered corner of the market, where a young girl is selling bundles of myrrh and mint, wrapped in linen. She hands you a small pouch, and when you open it, the scent hits you like a cool breeze across the desert. Earthy, slightly sweet, with a hint of sacred ceremony. You tuck it into your belt, just in case you need to impress a priestess later. Oh, and speaking of priests, the temple staff weren't just spiritual advisors. They were also herbalists, perfumers, and occasional toothpaste chefs. Some records even describe the preparation of tablets made from frankincense, cinnamon, and honey. Roll them, Dry them. Pop one after dinner. Congratulations, you've just taken the world's first breath mint. A few of these recipes show up in the Ebers Papyrus, a sort of ancient medical scroll meets kitchen notebook. It lists ingredients with instructions like grind finely and speak this spell over the paste, because nothing says effective dentistry like a little divine mumbling. As the sun lowers, casting honey gold across the sandstone, you notice an older man lighting an incense cone near his stall. The smoke curls upward, smelling of cardamom and something peppery. It's both cleansing and oddly calming, the kind of scent that might make even Anubis lean in for a second whiff. So yes, before Tic Tacs, before mint strips, before sugar-free. Gum, there were breath tablets lovingly shaped from sacred plants, divine resins, and the occasional ox part. They weren't just for your mouth, they were for your soul. As you wander deeper into the marketplace, your thoughts are momentarily distracted by a street performer, the rhythmic tapping of his sandals announcing his arrival. He's selling something unusual, tiny pots of unguents in every color, some shimmering with gold leaf, others painted in vibrant reds, blues, and greens. But among the array of perfumes and oils, a distinct concoction catches your eye, an amber-colored jar, its label bearing the inscription, "For breath." This, you realize, must be a type of fragrant balm or perhaps an early version of mouthwash. The idea of a breath-freshening liquid was far from new to the Egyptians. In fact, it was likely an extension of their fascination with oils and balms that had been used for centuries to anoint the dead and make offerings to the gods. But unlike those sacred oils, this one had a practical application. It would keep your breath sweet, preventing your soul from being tainted by foul odors. You turn the jar over, admiring the delicate inscription on its lid, and imagine the rituals it might have been part of. It said that priests and high-ranking officials would often carry small vials of these potent aromatic oils to use during religious ceremonies, much like today's perfume bottles. Perhaps this very jar was once worn around the neck of a priestess, who used it before delivering an important message from the gods. The concept of mouthwash as we know it might seem like a modern invention, but it has ancient roots that reach deep into Egypt's history. In fact, the earliest recorded recipe for mouthwash dates back to the 16th century BCE, and it wasn't too different from today's versions: water, herbs, and fragrant oils. Even the Bible mentions mouthwash, with references to using oils and herbs to cleanse the mouth. But before you can delve further into the intriguing history of ancient Egyptian hygiene, a procession begins to form in the distance. A long line of priests in flowing robes marches towards the great temple, their faces somber, their ritualistic movements perfectly synchronized. At the front, an elder priest holds a golden vessel, and you can see the soft glimmer of incense smoke rising from within. The procession's solemnity is like an ancient performance, with each movement carefully choreographed, as if they were conducting a sacred ritual, even in their very footsteps. The priestly procession is mesmerizing, and it's hard to look away as they pass by, their robes flowing gracefully in the wind. But as you stand there, lost in the sacred pageantry, you begin to realize just how much breath and scent played a role in Egyptian rituals. Historians still debate whether the Egyptians used fragrance in their religious practices purely for symbolic reasons, or whether they believed it had a purifying effect on the spirit. Either way, there's no doubt that scent was deeply tied to their worldview, a tool for communication with the gods. You might wonder, did the very act of inhaling fragrant oils during prayer elevate the soul? As you watch the procession fade into the distance, the last wisps of incense smoke curling into the air like ancient whispers, you can't help but feel a little lighter. The soothing scent of incense, the sweet balm of breath fresheners, it all seems to blend into a sense of purity, a balance between the material and spiritual realms. The incense still lingers in the air, as if it has woven itself into the very fabric of the day, and you continue your journey, following the flow of the marketplace. The crowd around you is starting to thin, but the hustle and bustle remain. You find yourself passing by a stall that catches your eye. It's filled with the brightest, most aromatic herbs you've ever seen. Bundles of dried lavender, sprigs of rosemary, and a few rare plants you don't even recognize, their scents, mixing into a heady perfume that almost overwhelms your senses. But among these familiar plants, something stands out. A small vial sits atop a bed of crushed herbs. Its delicate shape and the rich, deep color of its contents draw you in. The label is faded, but it bears the same inscription as the breath jar you saw earlier, with the words "sacred breath" etched in elegant hieroglyphs. You wonder if this is another version of the same concept, or if it holds a more potent power, a balm or liquid infused with divine energy. You ask the merchant about the vial, and she nods knowingly. "This," she says with a mysterious smile, "was made using the rarest herbs from the sacred temples." She continues, explaining that this was no ordinary breath freshener. It was used in ceremonies to elevate the soul and communicate with the gods. A few drops would be placed upon the tongue or dabbed on the wrists, creating a divine aura that was said to carry the person's prayers upward, to the heavens themselves. You're taken aback by the idea, considering how such simple, earthly things like herbs, oils, and unguents could serve as conduits to the divine. But it makes sense. Egyptians understood the power of scent in a way that we've only begun to grasp in modern times. Scents could bring back memories, calm the mind, and even change one's state of being. And here, in this bustling market, it seemed that something as simple as the right scent could connect you to a higher plane. Historians often marvel at how the Egyptians intertwined the physical and spiritual in everyday life. Whether through rituals, personal care, or the use of scents, they never saw the two as separate. But what remains debated is just how much the average person was aware of the spiritual weight of these scents. Did they see these oils and balms as just luxuries, or did they believe they were participating in something much larger than themselves? As the merchant's words fade, you take a deep breath, inhaling the calming aroma of the herbs around you. It's almost as if the entire marketplace has transformed into a sensory wonderland, where every scent carries a story, and every oil a ritual. The aromas swirl through the air, forming a tapestry of divine and earthly realms, leaving you to wonder how much of the sacred has been woven into the fabric of daily life. As the merchant wraps up her explanation, you glance over your shoulder, drawn to the sounds of a large crowd gathering near the great temple. The bustling market seems to be losing its charm for a moment as you become keenly aware of the procession, happening once more. But this time, it's different. It's not just priests. It's an entire group of high-ranking officials, perhaps the pharaoh's closest advisors, walking in perfect synchrony, their faces set in a quiet, determined expression. Each of them is adorned in bright linens, but it's the scent wafting from them that's the most striking. You notice that they are not just dressed in fine garments. Each of them wears a small satchel or pouch tied around their waist. It's something you hadn't seen before, and curiosity gets the better of you. As they pass by, you manage to catch the scent. A faint but unmistakable trace of something sweet and earthy, perhaps a delicate blend of frankincense and myrrh. Could this be some sort of custom that accompanies them on their way to the temple? The very thought makes you wonder about how the Egyptians used scents in their daily routines. In fact, scent was so intimately tied to Egyptian culture that they developed an entire profession around it. Perfumers, or oil blenders, were highly respected, often working in temples and royal courts. The oils and balms they crafted weren't just for personal use. They were often used in offerings to the gods, in religious ceremonies, and to anoint the bodies of the dead for the journey to the afterlife. You can almost picture it. Priests, carefully choosing the right blend of oils, a sacred ritual performed in a room thick with the heady smell of incense and fragrant oils. But these oils weren't just for the afterlife or the gods. They were used by the living too. Pharaohs, queens, and nobles would regularly apply oils to their bodies, both for cosmetic purposes and for their supposed protective qualities. And as you watch the procession, you wonder just how much of this reliance on scents was rooted in the belief that these fragrances could hold spiritual power. Some scholars argue that scents, for the Egyptians, were a way to ward off evil spirits, to maintain divine favor, or even to communicate directly with the gods. Did they see these oils as tangible connections to the divine, as potent as prayers themselves? Historians still debate how deeply the use of oils in everyday life reflected Egypt's religious practices. Whether the average Egyptian would use the same carefully crafted oils during a meal, or if the use of fragrance was more closely tied to specific rituals and ceremonies. As the officials pass into the temple, their scents lingering in the air, you're left with a lingering thought. The connection between scent and the sacred was no passing fancy. It was woven into the very structure of Egyptian life, elevating everyday actions into something more divine. With each step they take, you wonder, how much of the world around you is defined by these invisible threads, guiding your every breath, every movement? The scene of the procession fades into the distance, and you slowly return to your surroundings, taking in the vibrancy of the marketplace once again. You've grown so used to the sights and sounds that, for a moment, it almost feels like you've forgotten what it was like before, like these vibrant aromas and activities have always been a part of the world you're in. But something draws your attention. A small stall tucked into the corner of the market, nestled between the larger, more extravagant displays. This stall is modest, almost unremarkable at first glance. The merchant, an older woman with gray-streaked hair and soft, knowing eyes, seems to be carefully packing something into small ceramic jars. Her movements are deliberate and measured, her hands skilled and steady. You're curious, so you approach, drawn by the subtle fragrance that reaches you even before you reach her stall. The scent is sweet, but earthy, unlike anything you've smelled before, a blend of herbs, honey, and a hint of something floral, possibly lotus or lily. The merchant catches your eye and, noticing your interest, gestures to a small jar sitting on the table. "This," she says, her voice low and careful, "is a blend for your breath, just like the ones the priests use. But not for them alone. It's for anyone seeking balance, calm, and clarity. You'd be surprised how such a simple thing can change your mood, your state of mind." You nod, intrigued, and she continues her explanation. "It's a mixture of mints, sweet marjoram, and the dried petals of lotus flowers. A handful of these will clear the mind, soothe your heart, and make your breath as fresh as the Nile after a storm." She hands you the jar and you inhale its rich, layered scent. It's calming, almost like a balm for your senses, and it makes you feel as though the world around you is softening. The more she talks about it, the more you realize just how deeply integrated breath mints, or their ancient Egyptian equivalents, were into life. This was not just a matter of freshening breath after a meal. No, this was part of a deeper ritual, one that connected the body to the spirit. These scents, these flavors, were seen as vital to the maintenance of a balanced and healthy life, essential not only for the living but also for the spiritual and ritual practices of the Egyptians. Historians still argue over the exact purpose of these early mints. Some believe they were used for medicinal purposes, to help with digestion or to alleviate stress. Others argue that they were part of a larger system of ritual purity, meant to ensure that the gods would find the offerings of the people acceptable. What's clear, however, is that breath mints in Egypt were not mere luxuries. They were seen as powerful tools for maintaining spiritual harmony and balance. As you leave the stall with the jar in hand, the thought lingers in your mind. The Egyptians understood something profound. It wasn't just about the oils and herbs they used, nor the fragrances they wore. It was about the connection between the inner and outer world, between the physical and spiritual realms. And as you continue to walk through the market, you begin to see the world in a new light. The sights, sounds, and smells seem to carry more meaning now, more significance. You find yourself walking more slowly now, almost in a trance, the rhythmic motion of your feet following the steady beat of life around you. The sounds of the market are less jarring, the chatter of merchants and customers blending into a gentle, The jar in your hand feels heavier now, though you can't quite explain why. It's a simple thing, really, a small vessel filled with herbs and oils, but there's a sense of importance attached to it, as if it holds more than just its contents. Perhaps you think it's the knowledge that you're holding a piece of history, an artifact of the ancient world, a connection to the rituals that have survived for centuries. As you continue your stroll, the sun begins to dip lower in the sky, casting a warm, golden glow over everything. The colors of the market start to change, and you notice how the light reflects off the stone buildings, giving the entire scene a dreamlike quality. The air, still thick with the scents of the marketplace, begins to cool, and the once busy stalls begin to quiet as vendors pack away their wares for the evening. You wander towards the edge of the market, where the crowds thin out, and you're left alone for a moment. It's here, among the quieter paths, that you begin to reflect on all that you've seen today. There's more to Egypt than the grand temples and pharaohs. It's in the small details, the everyday life of the people, that the true essence of the civilization lies. The herbs and oils they used weren't just for their physical bodies. They were part of a greater understanding of the world, of how the senses were connected to the divine. You can't help but think about the ancient Egyptian belief in balance, how everything in life had its counterpart. There was the duality of day and night, life and death, chaos and order. Even the most basic elements of their lives, like breath, scent, and taste, were part of this intricate balance. The breath mints, for instance, were not just a way to freshen the breath after a meal. They were a way to restore harmony within oneself. With each mint, with each inhaled scent, the Egyptians were reminding themselves of their connection to the gods, to the land, and to the people around them. Historians still debate whether these early mints were used for purely spiritual reasons or if they had practical applications as well. Some argue that the fresh breath and calming effects were more than just ceremonial. They were an integral part of the daily lives of the people, helping to promote good health and personal well-being. Others suggest that the ritualistic use of mints and perfumes may have been part of a larger religious or societal structure, meant to emphasize the importance of purity and cleanliness in all aspects of life. Whatever the true purpose was, it's clear that these small rituals were essential to the Egyptians, and that's what makes them so fascinating to look back on. As the sun sinks lower, casting long shadows over the market and the people around, you realize how much you've learned today. The Egyptians weren't just inventing mints for the sake of convenience. They were inventing them to align themselves with the cosmos, to live in harmony with the world around them. These mints weren't just a way to freshen breath. They were a way to freshen the soul. You smile softly, realizing that sometimes the smallest things can carry the greatest meanings. And in that moment, you feel as though you've become a part of something much larger, something that transcends time. As you walk deeper into the evening, your steps slow even further, and the sky above darkens into a soft shade of twilight. The air is cool now, with a slight breeze rustling the palm fronds and carrying the scent of the Nile from the distance. The market is nearly empty now, save for a few lingering figures finishing their trades or gathering up their belongings. The gentle hum of the day's activities is replaced with the peaceful quiet of a setting sun. You hold the jar tighter in, your hand the cool ceramic now familiar and comforting. There's something meditative about it. The small ritual of the market, the quiet of the evening, and the subtle connection you've formed with this ancient practice. It's as if the world around you has grown quieter, more focused. The bustling city of the day has faded away, leaving behind only the essentials, the warm glow of twilight, the soft rustle of the breeze, and the weight of the ancient traditions that linger in the air. In the distance, the Nile can be seen, winding its way through the landscape, its surface reflecting the last hues of the sunset. The river, which has been the lifeblood of Egypt for millennia, carries with it the history of the people, the land, and the gods. It's a symbol of continuity, of the flow of time that links past and present. You stand for a moment, staring at the river's endless movement, and it's as if the rhythm of the water is in sync with the thoughts in your mind, calming and steadying you. You've learned so much today, and yet there's still so much more to understand. You begin to wonder, how many other small things, hidden in the corners of history, have shaped the world in ways that we can barely comprehend? Perhaps, you think, the creation of breath mints was just a small act in a long line of innovations, a forgotten moment in the grand tapestry of Egyptian civilization. But in their own way, these tiny mints and the rituals that surrounded them were as much a part of history as the grand temples and towering monuments. As the sun slips below the horizon, the market falls into darkness, but you feel a sense of contentment wash over you. It's a quiet satisfaction, knowing that the world of the past is still alive, still vibrant, and that even the smallest, most mundane inventions can carry with them the weight of a culture's philosophy and spirituality. Historians often debate how much of ancient Egypt's civilization was shaped by practical needs versus spiritual desires. Was the creation of these mints a necessary step for the people's health, or was it an act of devotion? There's no definitive answer, and perhaps that's the beauty of it. Ancient Egypt, like all great civilizations, is a mosaic of contradictions, practical and spiritual, mundane and divine. As you make your way away from the market, the city lights flickering softly in the distance, you find yourself reflecting on how the small details of life, things that may seem trivial or insignificant at first glance, can reveal so much about a culture, a people, and a time. The breath mints, the herbs, the sacred rituals, they were more than just elements of daily life. They were reflections of a society's deep understanding of the balance between the body, the spirit, and the world around them. And as the stars begin to twinkle above, you can't help but feel that, perhaps tonight, you've uncovered just a small glimpse into the timeless nature of human curiosity and innovation, a curiosity that spans centuries and continues to shape the world we live in. The moon rises high now, bathing the streets of the city in a silver glow. The air, still cool, carries with it the faint scent of the river, the earthy aroma of fresh herbs, and the lingering traces of incense that seem to follow you as you walk. The night feels peaceful, almost as if the entire world has entered a moment of quiet reflection, where all that is left is the soft rhythm of the universe itself. As you wander through the moonlit streets, you find your thoughts drifting back to the ancient Egyptians and their belief in the power of scent. For them, fragrance was not just a matter of taste or preference, it was an integral part of their connection to the divine. The oils, perfumes, and mints they created weren't simply for enjoyment, they were tools for spiritual alignment, designed to maintain harmony within oneself and between the physical world and the divine. You think about the materials they used to create these breath mints: myrrh, frankincense, cinnamon, and honey. These ingredients weren't just chosen for their pleasant aromas, but for their deep cultural and religious significance. Myrrh and frankincense, for instance, were often burned as offerings to the gods. Cinnamon, with its warming, aromatic scent, was associated with the sun and the sacred cycles of nature. Honey, the sweet gift of bees, was seen as a symbol of divine sweetness and prosperity. There's something profoundly calming about the way these ingredients, so simple, so natural, came together to form something far greater than the sum of their parts. They were part of a ritual, a moment of peace, a way to harmonize the body with the divine. And it makes you wonder how much of our modern world has lost that sense of connection to the earth, to the elements, to the things that really matter. You can almost imagine the ancient Egyptians, after a long, busy day, perhaps just like the one you've experienced, taking a moment to prepare their breath mints before the evening ritual. They would crush the herbs in a mortar, grinding them into a fine powder, mixing them with honey to form a paste, and then rolling them into small tablets or balls. Each one would be consumed in a quiet, reflective moment, allowing the aromas to fill the air and the senses, bringing a sense of peace and balance to the day's end. Historians still debate how these mints were consumed. Some argue that they were used as a form of ritual purification, while others believe they were more practical, used to cleanse the breath after meals. Some scholars even suggest that these mints had a dual purpose, serving both spiritual and hygienic needs. The fact that they were used in sacred rituals makes it clear that their significance went far beyond mere practicality. They were a tool to maintain the delicate balance between the earthly and the divine. As you continue walking, you think about how similar these rituals are to modern habits. We may no longer burn frankincense or mix myrrh with honey, but we still seek balance in our lives. We still look for moments of peace, moments of ritual, to bring ourselves back to center after a long day. And perhaps in a way that's the most enduring legacy of the ancient Egyptians, their understanding of the need for balance, for harmony, and for connection to something greater than ourselves. The night grows deeper, and the streets become even quieter. The city, it seems, has entered a peaceful slumber, the only sounds now being the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze and the distant flow of the Nile. You continue your walk, your thoughts lingering on the ancient world and the small, seemingly insignificant moments that shape a civilization. Historians often wonder how much of our modern practices are rooted in ancient rituals. The use of mints, perfumes, and oils in everyday life might seem like a simple matter of hygiene or luxury, but in ancient Egypt it was so much more than that. It was about ritual, about understanding the connection between the physical and the spiritual. And even in our fast-paced modern world, there's something undeniably comforting in knowing that these small, fragrant rituals still have a place in our lives. The stars above twinkle brightly, and the soft moonlight continues to pour down, casting a gentle glow over the city. You feel a sense of calm, of peace, as if you've touched something ancient and eternal tonight. A piece of history that's far greater than any one person, any one civilization. And as the night deepens, you allow yourself to rest, knowing that in this quiet moment, you're part of a story that spans thousands of years. The cool night air brushes your skin as you pause by the river, watching the water move steadily, reflecting the faint shimmer of stars overhead. You are in a world of rhythm, the pulse of the river, the breeze stirring the trees, and the occasional call of an owl breaking the silence. It's easy to forget how much of the ancient world centered around water, especially the mighty Nile, whose lifeblood ran through Egypt like a vein through the body. It was this river, you realize, that played a central role in the daily life of the Egyptians. It was their highway, their source of nourishment, and perhaps even their connection to the divine. In the distance, you can see the faint outline of the Great Pyramids, bathed in moonlight, their sharp, angular forms contrasting against the softness of the sky. They're imposing, but at this moment, they feel like silent sentinels, watching over a people who live their lives in harmony with nature. with the rhythms of the earth and sky. And it's in this harmony that the secrets of Egyptian mints and their other rituals begin to make sense. You wonder, as the gentle ripples of the river catch your eye, how many ancient Egyptians, like you, stood at this very spot, taking a moment to reflect on the balance between body and spirit, between the earthly and the divine. For the Egyptians, the Nile was not just a river, it was a gift from the gods, one that nurtured the land and their very existence. It's easy to imagine how, after a long day in the sun, one would seek out ways to cleanse themselves, not just physically, but spiritually. The ancient Egyptians believed in purification rituals for everything, from bathing to rituals involving perfumes and breath mints. And perhaps it was the Nile, so central to their lives, that reminded them of the need for purification and balance, for the simple joy of breathing in something fresh and pure. After all, the mints were about more than just taste. They were about bringing order to the world around them, even in something as simple as a breath. As you stand by the water, a thought crosses your mind. Could the Egyptians have also invented some of their own version of a breath mint for purely social purposes? After all, how many of us take care to freshen our breath when meeting friends, partners, or strangers? Though ancient Egypt is often remembered for its grandeur and mysticism, the Egyptians were also deeply concerned with the small details of daily life. The rituals of cleanliness and hygiene weren't just for the elite or the priests. They were for everyone. You can almost picture an ancient Egyptian noblewoman reaching for a mint just before she entered a gathering, hoping to refresh herself, to present the best version of herself to the world. Or perhaps a scribe, hurriedly chewing on something, fragrant before heading to the palace, hoping to be as presentable as possible. It wasn't just about appearance, it was about respect, about maintaining one's dignity in a society that valued social harmony and order. The mints, it seems, were used in more ways than you might have imagined. While they certainly had their ritualistic uses, the humble breath mint had a role in the social fabric as well. It was both a necessity and a luxury. It allowed people to care for their own well-being in a world that was always moving forward, where cleanliness and balance were not just about hygiene, but about how one interacted with others. Historians still debate whether these mints were considered a status symbol or something available to everyone. The evidence suggests that mints were not only available to the rich and powerful, but were used by many across different social classes, perhaps in different forms. The wealthy may have had access to the finest blends of cinnamon and myrrh, while the common folk might have used simpler herbs. Either way, it's clear that breath mints, as simple as they might seem, played a part in the everyday rituals that defined Egyptian life. You allow your mind to wander again, back to the streets of ancient Thebes, or perhaps the busy marketplaces of Alexandria. These places were filled with life, the air thick with conversation, the sounds of merchants hawking their goods, the smells of fresh bread and roasting meats. But beneath the surface, there was always a desire for cleanliness and harmony. The Egyptians had a way of looking at the world that went beyond the surface. Everything had a purpose, a reason for being. The breath mint was no exception. It wasn't just about freshening one's breath. It was about restoring balance, about aligning with something greater. As the night deepens and the stars overhead twinkle with ancient wisdom, you feel a deep sense of connection to this world that seems so far removed from your own. It's as though you've stepped back in time into a moment where the smallest rituals, like the act of chewing on a breath mint, were part of something larger, something more profound. You can't help but wonder how much of our own world, with its modern inventions and constant rush, has lost that sense of harmony. How many times do we stop to align ourselves with the rhythms of nature, with the delicate balance of life? The river continues to flow gently beside you, its steady current reminding you that time, like the Nile, moves inexorably forward. Yet, in this quiet moment, there's peace. peace in the knowledge that these small rituals, these little acts of care, continue to shape our world just as they did so many thousands of years ago. You can still feel the cool breeze as it rustles the tall grasses around you, the scent of the river carried on the wind. You're no longer just a visitor in the ancient world. You've become part of it, standing in the very place where the Egyptians once gathered their thoughts and breathed deeply, mindful of the balance they sought in their lives. It's strange to think of how such an ancient practice, the simple act of freshening one's breath, might have had such significance. Yet here you are, experiencing it in your own way. Perhaps this is what draws us to history, to these small glimpses of daily life in the past. The same human desires, the same concerns, the same rituals, they've been with us throughout time. You could imagine walking the streets of ancient Thebes, your footsteps falling in rhythm with those of the bustling crowds, everyone moving about their day with purpose, with meaning. The marketplace would be alive with noise and movement, the air thick with conversation, the scent of spices and perfumes. But what would you find if you were to look closely at the people around you? You'd see them doing the same things we do today, stopping for a moment to adjust their appearance, to take a breath, to freshen up, even if only for a fleeting moment. It's hard not to picture the sight of an Egyptian artisan pausing in the midst of his work, dusting off his hands, reaching for a small mint made from the finest ingredients available before resuming his task. His work was important. His legacy was tied to the creations he made, and he knew that every detail mattered. This practice, so simple yet so essential, was tied to the belief that the mind, body, and spirit were all connected. The Egyptians understood that purification wasn't just about cleaning one's body, but also one's soul. A mint was more than a mere afterthought. It was a part of maintaining harmony within oneself, aligning with the divine forces that ruled the world. You think about that for a moment. The act of chewing a mint was, in a way, an act of self-care, one that helped maintain that delicate balance between the physical world and the spiritual one. Historians still debate how much of this ritualistic nature of mint chewing was truly spiritual or merely practical, but the evidence leans towards both. The Egyptians, after all, were not just a spiritual people, they were practical too. They had to be. Their survival depended on their ability to navigate the world around them with skill and knowledge. They understood that every little detail, from the way they cleaned their teeth to the mint they chewed, had a purpose. It wasn't just about convenience. It was about creating an atmosphere of harmony and respect in their daily lives. The more you think about it, the more you realize just how sophisticated the Egyptians were in their understanding of the senses. They were keenly aware of the power of smell, of taste, of touch. The use of fragrances and mints wasn't just about masking unpleasant odors. It was about elevating the experience of living. A fresh breath wasn't simply a matter of hygiene, but a way to express oneself, to connect with others, and to make a lasting impression in an ever-changing world. And just as they understood the power of the senses, they also understood the importance of balance. The Egyptians weren't a people who rushed through life. They knew that to achieve true harmony, every element of life had to be in balance. This belief was reflected not only in their spiritual practices, but also in their daily routines. From the way they built their homes to the way they prepared their food, everything was done with a sense of rhythm and proportion. Imagine walking into a home in ancient Egypt. What would you see? A courtyard filled with shade from tall palms, a stone floor cool underfoot, perhaps the scent of incense drifting in the air. The mints, too, would have been placed with purpose, stored in small containers made from clay or precious metals, carefully kept in places where they could be accessed easily when needed. It wasn't about extravagance. It was about mindfulness. The sun would be high in the sky now, casting long shadows over the river, the light sparkling on the water's surface like scattered gems. You can almost hear the faint murmur of voices. In the distance, a steady hum of life that continues uninterrupted, day after day. As the heat of the day presses in, you think about how the Egyptians would have turned to their mints as a way to refresh themselves, to find balance amidst the sweltering heat. The importance of breath, of maintaining a clear mind and a fresh spirit, becomes clearer with each passing moment. These small practices, these little acts of self-care, weren't just about surviving, they were about thriving. Historians still argue whether the Egyptians viewed such practices as purely practical or whether they had a deeper spiritual meaning. But in the end, perhaps that question doesn't matter. Perhaps the act of taking care of oneself, of breathing in the cool air and chewing on a mint, was always both practical and spiritual, intertwined in a way that made sense in their world. And perhaps that's something we can all take with us today. The understanding that every little act, no matter how simple, can carry deeper meaning if we choose to make it so. The sun now begins to dip behind the distant hills, casting a golden glow over the land. The river, once a source of cool respite, now seems to shimmer with the warmth of the day's end. It's a time for reflection, for moments of stillness, and for remembering that the smallest rituals can have the greatest impact. You take a deep breath, inhaling the night air, and for a moment, you feel a connection to the ancient world, to the Egyptians who, thousands of years ago, believed that a simple mint could restore balance to their lives. As the evening settles in, the cool night air begins to take over the land. The sun, once an unrelenting presence in the sky, has finally bowed out for the day, and the stars begin to stretch across the heavens. The sounds of the bustling marketplace fade away, replaced by the gentle lapping of the river's water against the banks. It's the calm that follows the heat of the day, the transition from one phase of life to another. And in this quiet, you begin to reflect once more on the ancient Egyptians, on their wisdom, their rituals, and how their seemingly simple actions carried so much more meaning than we might have ever realized. You think about their dedication to balance, how they valued not just the physical act of cleansing, but also the purity of spirit that came with it. It wasn't simply about brushing one's teeth or making sure one's breath didn't smell. It was about purifying oneself, mind and soul. And the mint, this humble yet essential part of daily life, played a significant role in that process. You imagine standing at the edge of the Nile, watching the soft glow of the moonlight reflecting off the water. Perhaps some of the Egyptians you've come to know would have been doing the same, reflecting on the day's events, and preparing for a night of rest, mindful of how they cared for their bodies and their spirits. For them, the world was a place of constant motion, an ebb and flow of forces that needed to be respected. The Nile itself, with its seasonal flooding and receding, was a reminder of the cycles of life, birth, death, and rebirth. The Egyptians were deeply attuned to these rhythms, and they understood the importance of adapting to them. They knew that to live in harmony with the world, one had to take care of oneself. This didn't just mean physical care. It meant taking the time to pause, breathe, and reflect. It meant slowing down, even if just for a moment, and finding peace in the midst of the chaos. As you walk through the quiet streets, the sounds of footsteps in the sand beneath your feet, you can almost picture the scene unfolding before you. The houses, made of mud brick and stone, sit quietly in the cooling air, their walls adorned with intricate carvings of gods and animals. The occasional light flickers from a small oil lamp in a window, casting soft shadows on the ground. It's a time of solitude, of introspection, as people begin to settle in for the night, their minds still processing the events of the day. You wonder if they, too, paused to chew on a mint, taking a moment to refresh themselves before sleep. But It wasn't just about personal ritual, it was about the shared experience. The Egyptians lived in a world that was closely knit, where each person's actions affected the community as a whole. The mints they used were not just for individual use, but also shared among family members, neighbors, and colleagues. This act of sharing was an essential part of the culture. It wasn't just about personal care, but about showing respect for others. By offering a mint to someone, you were not just offering a fresh breath. You were offering a moment of peace, a gesture of goodwill. Historians still debate whether the Egyptians' rituals were primarily social or personal. Some argue that the mints were used as part of formal ceremonies, while others believe they were a simple part of everyday life. What's clear, however, is that these small acts were a reflection of a larger worldview. The Egyptians believed in balance, in harmony, and in the interconnectedness of all things, and through their rituals, they expressed that belief. In the distance, you can see the silhouette of a pyramid, rising up against the darkening sky. It's a symbol of the eternal, of something that endures long after the people who built it have gone. You think about how much of their knowledge has been lost to time, how much of their culture has faded into the sands of history. Yet here you are, in the midst of it all, connecting with their legacy in a way that might surprise you, through something as simple as a mint. As the night grows darker, you find yourself growing more introspective. The stars above seem to twinkle, with an ancient wisdom, as though they, too, are reminding you of the lessons the Egyptians imparted through their daily lives. They understood that the small things matter. They knew that the simple act of chewing a mint, of breathing in the cool night air, was a way to reconnect with the world, to restore balance, and to keep one's mind and body in harmony. Now, as you prepare for sleep, you can almost feel the weight of their wisdom settle over you like a comforting blanket. The world may be different now, but in some ways, it's the same. People still seek out ways to refresh themselves, to maintain balance in their lives, and to find peace in the midst of the chaos. You take a deep breath, imagining the mint you might have chewed, and allow yourself to drift off to sleep, carrying with you the knowledge of the Egyptians' timeless wisdom. As you begin to drift deeper into sleep, a peaceful calm settles over you. The day has come to an end, and the quiet of the night wraps around you like a soft, comforting blanket. You can almost hear the faint hum of the Nile in the distance, the gentle sounds of the river flowing as it has for millennia. The ancient Egyptians, whose world you've been exploring, are no longer here, but their legacy lingers. Their breath mints, simple yet powerful, are just one small piece of the grand mosaic they left behind, a civilization that understood the importance of balance, care, and community. In the dimming light of your imagination, you find yourself walking through the streets of ancient Thebes once more. The city is quiet now, the markets have closed, and families are beginning to settle in for the night. The scent of the earth mingles with the last traces of herbs and oils, the very air filled with the soft remnants of daily life. Perhaps in a humble home somewhere, a family shares their final moments of the day, biting down on a mint to freshen their breath before heading to bed. It's a quiet, private moment, but it's also one that connects them to something far bigger, a link between past and present. Historians still wonder about the long-lasting impact of small gestures like this one, how something as simple as a mint could reflect an entire culture's values and beliefs. Some say that it was more than just about fresh breath. Others claim that it was an act of purification, an offering to the gods that carried a deeper meaning. Whatever the truth may be, it's undeniable that these small, thoughtful actions were a part of everyday life in ancient Egypt, a way for people to care for themselves and each other in the midst of their complex, ritualistic world. As you drift deeper into this dreamlike reflection, your mind begins to slow, each thought fading like the distant stars above. The ancient Egyptians' commitment to self-care and balance now feels like an old lullaby, gentle and reassuring. They believed that the health of the body was connected to the health of the spirit, and as you sink into your own rest, you feel that connection too. The ancient world, with all its wonders and wisdom, is still here, in the quiet moments we share, in the rituals we hold dear, and in the simple acts of care that bridge the gap between the past and the present. Now, let your body relax and allow the whispers of ancient Egypt to lull you deeper into the folds of your dreams. The mints may have been small, but their significance endures, just as the teachings of the ancients still echo through time, in every breath we take. Let that calmness settle over you as the night deepens, and rest easy in the knowledge that, like the Nile itself, the rhythms of life continue to flow, steady and eternal.